I'm a 16-year-old male, and at the time this occurred, I lived in a town in northeast Tennessee. At the time, I was living with my mother and sister while my father was working overseas. This occurred a few years ago when I was 13. My father, being a former police officer, always made sure we lived in the safest neighborhood with security cameras, alarms, etc. That was especially important to him because he couldn't be there with us all the time. One night at around 9:30 p.m., my mom's sister and I were doing some spring cleaning throughout the house. My mother had me take out a box of magazines that she didn't want anymore. Even before this experience, I was always very paranoid about going out at night, and I've always been very aware of my surroundings. Maybe because I'm constantly watching TV shows like Criminal Minds and Law and Order. As I picked up the box and walked outside, I did my routine of looking around the neighborhood. When I didn't see anyone or anything, I walked to the trash cans at the end of the driveway and got ready to throw the box in the trash. Just my luck, the box broke and all the magazines fell out. I groaned and began to pick them up when I saw a man walking fast towards me. My fight or flight kicked in. I screamed and started to run through my yard to my house door. I stupidly looked back behind me, and to my horror, I could see the man was running after me, and he was closing in fast. I felt his hand brush against my shoulder, but he didn't have a good enough grip, so I was able to shake it off. By this time, I was getting ready to run up the stairs to my house. I ran up the stairs and tried to open the door, but my sister had locked it. I banged and screamed, and when the door opened, I fell inside. When I looked behind me, the man was running down the road in the other direction. After about 15 minutes of being hysterical, I was finally able to explain to my mother what happened, and she immediately called 911. The cops came in 5 to 10 minutes and did a sweep around the house. We had a security camera at the top of our driveway, and we all went to see if it caught anything. To my horror, the camera picked up the man practically running across the street right towards me. It showed the man running after me when I noticed him. As I stated before, it was nighttime, so the only description I could give the officer was that the person who chased me was a tall white man with camouflaged clothes on. The officer told me that he would do rounds around the neighborhood at night for the next 2 weeks. Unfortunately, I don't think they were able to find whoever it was due to me not being able to give a lot of details. I never heard anything about it afterwards. This is a weird thing that happened to me last month. I was over at my friend's house one Friday night. We just watched a movie and screwed around on the internet. I had just gotten my driver's license, and I drove my mom's car there. When it got late, probably close to midnight, I headed out. When I was about halfway home, I realized that my car was running low on fuel. I decided to put some gas in on the way. I pulled into a gas station, and the dimly lit surroundings gave it a slightly eerie feeling. The buzzing fluorescent lights overhead cast an obnoxious glow. The night was quiet except for the distant hum of the passing cars. Parking my car next to the pumps, I hopped out and reached for the fuel nozzle. I had only filled up a car on my own a few times, and I was pretty uncomfortable with it. I'm sure it looked like I didn't know what I was doing. I figured it out though. As I began filling up my tank, I glanced around and noticed a man loitering near the pumps. What struck me as odd was that he didn't have a car of his own. He stood there, seemingly out of place, and our eyes met briefly. There was something unsettling about his presence. His appearance was unkempt, with tattered clothes and disheveled hair. His eyes darted around nervously, and a shadow of a smile appeared on his face. I tried my best to ignore him and focus on my car, but I couldn't shake off the uneasy feeling that he caused. I held the nozzle in my car for 30 seconds or a minute, and then the man approached me. He asked me a few mundane questions, just how's it going, or what's up. My answers were short and cold. It must have been obvious that I didn't want to talk. When I was done, I attempted to pay for my fuel at the pump, hoping to get out of there quickly. However, I couldn't get the thing to work. I wasn't sure if it was broken or if I was missing something. Either way, I had no choice but to go inside the gas station and settle the bill. I walked away from my car, and the creepy guy was still standing there. Stupidly, I didn't lock it. I guess I was worried that it would show him I was scared, or maybe I was worried that he would get angry. As I entered the well-lit convenience store, the scent of cheap coffee filled the air. The cashier greeted me and asked me how he could help. I explained the payment issues and handed over my credit card, eager to wrap up the transaction quickly and return to my car. Moments later, I had paid successfully, and I stepped out of the gas station, only to find a chilling sight that made my heart skip a beat. There, sitting inside my car, was that very same man who I had seen earlier by the pumps. He was just sitting in my front passenger seat, not hiding or anything. I quickly rushed back into the store. I told the cashier about the guy in my car. Sensing the urgency in my voice, the cashier's expression turned serious, and without any hesitation, he reached for the phone and called the police. We waited for the authorities to arrive. I was anxious, and I was pacing back and forth in that store. The image of the man sitting in my car was really shocking. I was embarrassed that I didn't lock the door when I left. What if he had hidden in the back seat or something? Then I could be in real trouble. That's like the start to many horror movies, but it almost happened to me for real. Finally, the police arrived. They approached my car and ordered the guy to get out. Thankfully, he complied, and they didn't have to use much force. As I watched from a distance, I could hear him making excuses to the officer. He said it was just a joke. I guess the humor was lost on me, because when a creepy stranger gets into my car out of nowhere, I don't laugh. I lived in a single-story house with my roommate Jeff. It was a small place with just 2 bedrooms, perfect for 2 young guys just out of college. My bedroom was at the front corner of the house, with one window on a pretty busy street. The other window was on the other side of the house, which was kind of like a narrow alley. That's where our garbage cans were. It was shared with our neighbor. Not much of a view, really. The next house was about 4 or 5 feet away. My bed was next to that window, because it was a little quieter over on that side. One night, as I lay in bed, I could hear the familiar sounds of the street outside my window. I always kept the curtains drawn to maintain my privacy. Without my curtains, the room would be on full display to anyone passing on the street. As the time approached 1 a.m., a jarring noise startled me. It was a rattling sound, as if someone was trying to open my window. It came from the one on the side of the alley. I jumped up right in bed and looked over. The curtains were blocking my view, and I was too scared to open them. Without hesitation, I leapt out of bed and scrambled to the other side of the room. I bolted out of the room and slammed the door behind me. Then I pressed my body against it. My voice trembled as I urgently called to Jeff. He was in his room, probably sleeping until that moment. I screamed that somebody was breaking in. Suddenly, I heard the window smash. He was in. Jeff came running over to me, with his phone already out. He called the police, while I held the door. Jeff quickly told them our address, and that it was urgent. Together, we waited in the dimly lit hallway. The minutes dragged on, each passing second amplifying the tension in the room. Eventually, the police arrived. We were really happy they were there. The officers entered our home, and I moved away from the door. As soon as they opened the door, I saw a man standing in my room. He was about 40 years old, tall and thin, with a mean look on his face. An expression that seemed to show disdain, like I was the one who broke into his house, but it was the other way around. The officers told me to step back, and that's what I did. Jeff and I went into the other room and let the police do their job. We didn't hear much from the other room. The cops shouted a few orders, but there was no screaming, and thankfully, no gunshots. In the end, justice prevailed. The police apprehended the intruder. Whatever his intentions were didn't matter. He was gone. I stayed with my parents for the next week while my window was being fixed. Our landlord decided to install bars on all the windows after this happened. I'm glad he did, even though it looks like some kind of prison now. Our neighborhood is a little rough, and a lot of the other houses have bars. Drugs have increasingly become a problem in the area, so you can never be too careful. I was on the bus late at night, tired from a long shift at work. I looked at my phone as the bus meandered through the city streets. It was just past midnight. I was settled near the back of the bus, with many empty seats around me. As the bus made its way through the city, I glanced out the window, watching the lights blur past in a hypnotic rhythm. The city seemed to be asleep, wrapped in a shroud of darkness. I was about halfway through my 45-minute ride, when suddenly, the bus made an unexpected turn, deviating from its usual route. The driver's voice crackled through the speakers, announcing that this was the end of the line. I heard a light sigh from the other two passengers when they realized the bus was doing a short turn. We would have to wait for the next one. Everyone filed out of the bus and reluctantly stepped onto the unfamiliar street corner. There were only 3 of us in total. As soon as the bus took off, the other 2 passengers disappeared. I didn't know where they went, but I figured they were close enough to their destination that they decided to walk. I still had a long way to go, too much to walk. When I was waiting for a few minutes, maybe 10 minutes, someone walked up to me at the bus stop. As he came closer, I could tell that it was a man around my age, and he walked with a limp. I made eye contact with him and gave him a quick nod before looking away. However, I saw out of the corner of my eye that he walked up next to me, and then I heard him say, "Hey buddy, got $1?" I know it's a question, but it didn't feel that way. It felt more like a demand. It was more like, give me $1 or else. I felt threatened, and I didn't want to be pushed around like that. I also didn't have any cash on me anyway. I turned to him and said, "No, sorry, I don't have any cash." Then I turned back around, hoping he would leave me alone. But then he stepped in front of me, and I noticed he was holding a small knife in his right hand. I looked up to his face, and his expression was so calm and mundane that I thought he must do this all the time. I didn't say a word, and neither did he. Seconds later, the sound of rumbling engines filled the air. Relief washed over me as the next bus appeared. The headlights almost blinded me, and before I knew it, the man was gone. I quickly boarded the bus, my hands trembling with a mixture of fear and gratitude. As the bus doors closed behind me, I sank into a seat, overcome with a rush of emotions. The bus began moving once again, and I was really happy to be safe. Finally, the bus arrived at my stop, and I stepped off onto my street. I looked over my shoulder as I walked home, but nothing else happened. I made it home and tried to get some sleep. This was one of the 3 times that I was almost mugged. One time I was actually mugged. Maybe I'll share those stories sometime, but they're pretty similar to this one, so maybe not. A little context before I tell you my scary story. I was a sophomore at a small private university in Arkansas. Due to reasons I'm still unaware of, my randomly selected roommate never showed up, and I had the room to myself. I was on the first floor because I was late in picking a room. Also, I'm a pretty big guy, 6'4" and around 200 pounds, skinny yet solid. One night in late October, I was doing some late homework and playing some video games. Most nights I was in bed by 1:30, but this night, I finally got in bed at 3 a.m. I slept next to my window, and I had my blinds mostly closed, but open just enough to let some light through. That way I wouldn't oversleep and miss my morning classes. My room was situated next to the testing building with a medium-sized grassy area and sidewalk between it and my room. Some nights, I'd peek through my blinds because I'd see shadows moving. Most of the time it would just be a squirrel or a university police officer checking the doors to the testing building to see if they were locked. But sometimes it wouldn't be, and it would be people from town coming onto campus to hang out or something. My campus had a curfew of midnight on weekdays and 1 a.m. on weekends. Really dumb, but it is what it is. Like I said, it was 3 a.m. when I was finally getting to bed, and I had a show playing in the background for noise. It was 3:33 a.m. I remember the time because I've always been very superstitious about the devil's hour. I was drifting off to sleep when I heard a tapping sound on my window. I ignored it at first, thinking it was just a dumb squirrel who was jumping off a bush next to my window, but it happened again. I opened my eyes and saw a tall, slender silhouette of a man standing outside my window. I immediately woke up and grabbed my pocket knife off my desk. I opened my dresser to get my hunting knife out as well. I wasn't supposed to have that, but I brought it in to sharpen a few days before and hadn't taken it back to my truck yet. I was mostly scared because the town I went to school in was known for meth addicts, and if he was high, he wouldn't have stopped because of pain or anything. He could have done whatever he wanted. Thankfully, he walked away almost immediately after I grabbed the knives. I still don't know what made him tap on my window, but I'm not sure I want to know.